brought her expertise, but she did not bring her strategic positioning, right? So, it's essential, because a lot of doctors are like, well, how do I show up strategically? And this is something that we work on purposefully during the Doctors in Industry program, right? Because strategy is everything. So I get this story happening several times a week. So there are so many doctors now who are really interested in health tech, which is great, by the way. Health tech is still really, really underrepresented when it comes to doctors. And they've usually been approached by a founder or someone working in the company. They may have been invited to a call or two, but then it tends not to go anywhere, really. And there's lots of reasons for that. And when I usually ask doctors, like, what happened? And usually the answer comes out something like, hey, I gave them some input, I gave some advice. Usually it was for free, but they weren't really clear on what they needed from me. I wasn't really clear on how to offer them anything. They didn't tell me what they wanted, and they didn't really have a job going, and they only had so much money. And, basically there was this complete stalemate. Right, where neither party really knows what to do with each other, and so they just it just all kind of falls apart. But this is the reality. Like, startups don't know how to work with doctors, right? They are not the NHS. They are not a healthcare provider. They don't have that experience. They are just people who have had this great idea in health and tech, and they need that medical validation. So if you don't know how to position yourself, you will be seen as like a nice to have, not business critical, right? Because a lot of these founders have gotten surprisingly far without medical backing. And there's another whole story behind that. But when they get that validation, it's like, we can build a health tech company without doctors. They will continue to do it until it's like essential. But usually they end up wasting a lot of money doing that, because they do always get to a point where they realize, oh shit, this is critical. We need to get some kind of medical backing behind this. So this episode is really about flipping that narrative. It's enabling you to talk about how you can become the most trusted, strategic voice in the room and really blow up in the greatest way the health tech sector and really solidify your influence and credibility. So, are you ready to go? Let's get going. So this is like one of several stories I tend to get, right? So, and this happened really recently. I actually found a non-medic. We had some doctors who came in earlier on, and they came in with their clinical input, but we really found it difficult to take their input like seriously, because they just didn't get the business side of things. They got the clinical, but not the business. And some of them didn't really take us seriously. And it was when they got to a funding round when they were like, where is your clinical validation? Right? Where is your clinical and where's the medical evidence? Some of the investors were doctors themselves. And that's when we realized that we really needed someone who not only got the clinical, but also got the commercial to back it up. Right. So in doing so, was able to really show product. The founder just didn't know what good or great clinical input looked like, alongside that commercial context as well. So didn't really trust the input they were given. And the doctors didn't really know how to show up beyond being a doctor, right? Beyond being a reviewer. So as you can see, nothing was stuck. And the investors, what are they looking for? Then they're looking for not only clinical credibility, but also strategy, foresight, right? And so this is the gap, right? And so we had another doctor who was invited to advise in a digital health startup. I think it was a chronic pain startup. And she joined a few calls, shared some feedback on the user journey, and even was like, yeah, this bit is quite risky, clinical risk alert. And they were all very happy with that. And then that was it. There was no other callback after that for her, right? And a few months later, this startup actually managed to raise about just over 1.2 million. Right. And, obviously she'd given the input. but she wasn't mentioned. She wasn't in the founding team, and she wasn't involved. So what went wrong here? So what went wrong? Right. So number one, she didn't really have a defining role. She was a doctor who gave some advice, and that was it. Right. Two, she didn't really understand the value of what she had to offer, and the impact that had. So she didn't really link those insights into product traction or outcome. So a lot of doctors I see go in on a kind of medical writing, medical accuracy, product advisory, general advisory kind of bag, and it's like, pay you by the hour and thank you very much for your help. But actually, this is like huge input, huge, tangible, valuable input that people would pay tens of thousands, hundreds of millions for, right? And because she didn't really understand how to articulate her value in a commercial context, this opportunity did not come back, and she wasn't able to even demonstrate to the people that she'd worked with that it was because of her of the what she'd contributed that really helped them to raise that amount of money. She brought her expertise, but she did not bring her strategic positioning, right? So it's essential, because a lot of doctors are like, well, how do I show up strategically? And this is something that we work on purposefully during the Doctors in Industry program, right? Because strategy is everything. We don't have loads of time. We're busy. A lot of doctors who work with us are in clinical, loving it some of the time, and it's like, well, this is something that I can do to help really develop my influence and impact outside of a traditional clinical setting and do more, right? And a lot of them just don't know how to show up in a way that actually provides value. So there was another doctor who, let's just compare with another story. We had another doctor who approached a health tech startup before they launched. Instead of offering to review things, they said, I help companies shape clinically credible pilots that build trust with users and speed up adoption. Would you like help with that? Right. So think about it. You're a doctor who says, do you have a role? I can do medical accuracy, or I can advise. Or you've got a doctor who is like, I shape clinically credible pilots that build trust with users and speed up adoption, right? And so you can see the difference. One is a role, one is a result. What would you buy into? You want the results, right? It's not about the role name, it's the results. That is what people buy into. That is what you probably bought into. That's what you're being sold all the time. Whether it's a service, whether it's a product, whether it's a holiday, it's about the results. It's about the outcome that you're getting, right? So this person, she framed her work in terms of adoption, trust, and credibility that directly affected the investment and growth of the company. Right, of the company. And in order to do that, she had a very specific niche. I know a lot of doctors are very, very scared of niching down, but the more you niche down, the more there is to do. That's what I found. That's what my fellows have found. The more you niche down, the more there is to do, because you become really specialist in the problem, right? You understand the problem like the back of your hand, and companies hire people or doctors to solve problems. Right, they pay for problems to be solved. Right, they don't pay for you to just sit in a role. They pay for problems to be solved. And so, in her contribution to the company, specifically in that niche, a role was created. Right, from usually a 3-month contract to longer, because the more you work with companies, the more they're like, hey, do you want to come back and do more? Oh, you uncovered this problem, do you want to go back and do more? Hey, actually, you made these recommendations, and the doctor's saying, hey, these are my recommendations, which one would you like to work on next? You end up doing more. So, this doctor, she designed them a pilot, she introduced some NHS contracts, she helped secure some user feedback, and that whole pilot became a case study that they used for their next fundraise. So that's what I mean, is she didn't have to go to business school to do this. She just simply positioned herself strategically to work with specific types of companies, understanding that they had a specific problem that she could help them with. right? Did not have to go to MBA school for that. This is strategy. This is what strategy looks like, right? Did not have to do research into how the company was structured. It's like, how can I help you solve a pain that you have or a problem that you have? So if you're a doctor listening to this and you're like, light bulb, and hopefully you are, you really need to focus on becoming a trusted voice, not just another doctor who's like, give me a role, I'm a clinician, and that's all I know, that's all I can actually tell you about. You want to be someone who's trusted by startups, right? So my first recommendation is to stop offering help in the sense of, simple, instead of saying like, oh, do you want some help or advice? It's more like you want to help the founder get to a clarity situation. So, instead of like, I want to like, let me know how I can support, love to have a chat. It's more like, how can I help you reduce your clinical risk and shape a credible pilot and get your adoption faster? Right. We use that kind of approach, especially when we're doing clarity statements. We call them clarity statements for a reason. I help your companies, the type of companies you want to help. I help them achieve transformational outcome. So that would be getting adoption faster and a credible pilot. And also in like reducing clinical risk is also a potentially a transformational outcome, right? And as I talked about outcomes, that's really the people are paying for. This is what companies are paying for. So founders don't understand this. I do understand like doing this will help your users trust your product. Doing this will help you reduce your compliance risk. Doing this will help your product be way more fundable than it is now and get you more money because the investors will, So it's really important to understand like what is the impact of your clinical advice expertise on the wider business strategy. And the simple way of understanding that is simply by asking and listening. It is really not difficult. I usually go to, when I work with companies, it's like, hey, so tell me like, what is the biggest thing top of mind with you right now? What is your most immediate need? What is the business working on? What is the shorter term goals? What are the longer term goals? What are your biggest challenges right now? I don't really talk about myself at all because all I'm doing is essentially triaging and saying, trying to understand where is it that I can help them. And it might not be that I can help them. But then many of the time, if you've done your work to get to that call, you'd have a good idea of how you can help them and then fit in to their narrative, not your narrative, their narrative. And this is also part of sales, right? It's really important to use stories more than stats. So I love a good story, and so does everyone else. I've been telling a lot of stories in this episode. So it's really important to focus on the stories. People connect with case studies and examples, whether it's yours, whether it's someone else's, whether it's another story. We are human beings, we connect with stories, right? So, you say, well, based on my experience, I was working with some patients and they were confused by the features on this app. And as a result, they stopped using the app. But this is what we could do moving forward to help improve the app and using the feedback, right, that they can actually use. And the last bit is making sure you're visible. So I talk about visibility quite a lot. We talk about networks, we talk about personal branding, but it's all about visibility. So actually being clear that you're there to help people. And so you're not the world's biggest secret, right? So you can go, for example, I help Healthtech startups go from clinically shaky to fundable by shaping trusted pilots and messaging, right? So that's an example. It's just super clear as what you do. And even then, like Healthtech startups is not niche enough, right? I always go niche. So you might work with wearables. You might work with med tech. Again, you could niche as far down as you can. The niche you are, the more valuable you are. Right. And this is crucial now, right? If you're like, hey, I can do this next year or already or around this, anything's wrong. We're all perfectionists here, right? We want to make sure that we're absolutely right, like 100% of the time. That must you really, really genuinely believe in your ability to help other people in industry and especially companies and the wider population that you serve. That has to go, simply because that delay costs you money, it costs the company's money, and it costs the health of millions of people. It's happening all the time because there are so many doctors who are like, oh, I'll do it later, or I'm not ready, or I'll wait until, right? So it's the doctors that are like, I'll do it now, but I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, but I'll work it out on the way. Those are the ones that actually get results and make change fast, right? Things need to move fast. A lot of this, especially in early stage startups, is about experimentation. It's about pivoting. It's about understanding the market, and things move fast, right? There's a lot of testing and iteration. No place for perfection, because perfection costs a lot of money at the beginning, right? And so without doctors in this process, like, these companies are still flying relatively blind, right? So remember, you have that clinical as a doctor, but what you really need is that commercial framing and strategic presence in real world terms. So not in the theory terms, not in the I'm going to sit and study this for years terms. This is in the actually do this terms, like the actually I've studied medicine for 5 years. I'm actually going to go and do the medicine now and do the this terms, right? How much have you learned in medical school compared to actually working as a doctor? Which one stuck the most, right? You know the answer to that question. So this is why we built the Doctors in Industry program, for those who are learning through doing the thing, not thinking or talking or reading about the thing, right? So if you've been, because I've seen a lot of you have been circling around Medic Footprints for years, joining our events, our masterclasses, our calls, reading our listen to this podcast, watching others, hearing about some of these other doctors getting involved. You're listening to this episode now, and this is probably one of like 70 you've listened to. Come on, let's have a chat. Because at the end of the day, credibility is not something that you're given, right? It's not something that a certificate can give you. It's totally something that you step into, something that you build from yourself, right? It comes from you, right? So if you are ready to do that with support, structure, and strategy in a real safe space where you're bigged up by everyone who's like you, and you get opportunities. Even today, I've just had a WhatsApp message, and we've got doctors who are referring doctors to organizations. None of this stuff applies. Let's help you. So if you want to have that conversation, the link is in the show notes. Anyway, I'll see you in the next episode.